All right, good evening and welcome. Thank you, everyone. My name is Simon Gutierrez. I'm on the communications team with Pacific Power. Thank you for coming tonight. I hope you all got a plate of food. It was delicious. Thank you for the folks at the barbecue over there. That was some fine food. I don't know if you tried the spicy hot sauce or the spicy barbecue sauce, but that was made me clear my throat a few times. Anyways, we're here tonight to talk about wildfire. I know talking to a few of you before the meeting here that wildfire is something you're familiar with and have experienced before, both positive and negative, I'm sure, but probably mostly negative. We're here to talk about wildfire mitigation. That is the things that we are doing as a company to guard communities like yours against the threat of wildfire. Wildfire mitigation is a top priority for our company. We've spent millions of dollars over the last 5 years invested in wildfire mitigation efforts, and we've committed to spending upwards of $2 billion across our 6-state service area in the next 5 years or so. Again, on wildfire mitigation, it's a very important thing to us. What we're doing today is we're going to have some information for you. We're going to provide some slides and some videos to give you an idea of what we're doing on the ground, what we're doing to mitigate it against the threat of wildfire. That can take a couple of different approaches. We have a holistic approach, so we kind of combine three different legs of the stool to get to where we're in a space where we're comfortable that we're doing enough to mitigate against the threat of wildfire. I mentioned slides. We're going to have a few slides. So here's kind of what's going to happen tonight. We're going to have a presentation from some of our experts. We have Chester Lampkin over here to my right. He's one of our meteorologists. We've got 5 in-house meteorologists currently, and they're watching the weather 24/7 so that we can stay ahead of any scary or dangerous weather events and or fire danger. Then we have Nora Yatsov here to his left and my right. She's our Director of Emergency Management. She's going to talk to you about some of the things that you can do around your own home to protect yourself and your property, and also some of the things that we can do to help you in a situation where there might be a power outage related to a wildfire. We've got some rebates and some programs that you can take advantage, and she'll clue you in on that. And then we have Megan Buckner. She's our Director of Wildfire Program Delivery. I think I got that right. I don't know. I may not have got that right. That's a tough title. But anyway, she's an expert on wildfire mitigation with the company. She's an engineer. She's going to walk you through a lot of the stuff that we do, the technical aspects of the things that we're doing on our equipment, with some of our power lines and with some of our settings to make sure that communities are safe in a time of wildfire. So we're going to start with that presentation. At the end of our presentation, we're going to have some Q&A opportunities, so I'm sure you all have a lot of questions. We're here to answer those questions. We're also here to listen to any feedback that you guys might have, so don't be shy. What we're going to do is we're going to have the 3 presenters, and then afterward the Q&A, and we'll have someone come around the room with a microphone, and you can ask your question, and we'll do our best to answer it. One of the 4 of us should probably be able to answer the question. If for whatever reason we can't answer the question, we will take your name down, and we'll get back to you with an answer. We promise that. So before we do any of that, we're going to start with a little bit of a video. I think if I got the slides in the right place here, even if I don't, we're going to start with a little bit of a video that's a high-level view of some of our wildfire mitigation efforts. Kind of explains through video and through some interviews what we're doing, and that'll kind of tee up the rest of the conversation. So let's take a look at that video right now.
It's important for a utility to prepare for major events, including storms and wildfire, to keep our customers safe in the communities that we serve. PacifiCorp, over the last several years, has put a lot of effort and thought into wildfire safety, wildfire mitigation across the 6-state territory that we have, specifically identifying the areas that are of higher risk in impact and consequence.
We're making very prudent investments to improve reliability, improve the resiliency of our network, and then more importantly, to prevent wildfire risks.
Grid hardening is anything that you do to improve your system, whether it be to add technology or to simply rebuild a line, replace poles, replace wire. All of those things add to the reliability of the system.
Covered conductor, it's got a bare wire in the center, but it's actually covered in a real hard insulation. The point of it is if a tree or something were to come into the line and make contact, it would help in preventing a wildfire from starting. it can actually be beneficial year round. From winter storms to branches being laid into the line, it'll actually keep the power on.
We're rebuilding literally hundreds of miles of lines and adding intelligent devices out into the field that will give us better situational awareness, real-time control, and information right at our fingertips so that we can react faster.
The deployment of additional field devices such as field reclosers allow us to de-energize from a point out that impacts only the necessary customers.
We can actually open or close these switches remotely instead of having to get somebody to come out in the field at one of those locations.
We're deploying several hundred weather stations across our service territory. Those weather stations are used to feed information into our weather modeling and give our forecasters better handle of what's happening in our system.
Weather is the number one impact on system reliability, on your electric service. We are currently running high resolution forecast models. We're creating hourly 30-year data sets of historical weather conditions. We're combining all of this with wildfire modeling software that allows us to simulate millions of wildfires every day so that we can map out the risk and the consequence of wildfires based on current forecast conditions. So all of this information allows us to better understand what's coming and where we need to focus to take action to stay ahead of those wildfire risks.
Vegetation management is ensuring that we don't have trees that grow into the power lines. It's also managing defective or hazardous trees, working around poles and making sure that we have clearance at the base of poles. And so this is a perfect example, looking up at that tree right there with the dieback that started up on the top. And typically when you have about 1/3 to 2/3 of the tree that's dying, it's very difficult for the tree to come back from that.
So investments in wildfire mitigation live on beyond just the reduction of wildfire risk. These are investments that help the system be more resilient in the long term, through the winter storms, through the summer wind events. These investments provide value to the customers for years to come.
All right, so that gives you kind of a big picture overview of some of the efforts that we're taking on the ground. Start off with a more of an in-depth conversation about some of the things that were talked about in the video. We're going to go to Chester Lampkin, one of our meteorologists. Chester, come on up. The floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Simon. Can you guys hear me okay? All right. Actually, I think I'm going to grab this other mic here in a second. But first, I just want to say good evening and thanks for coming out. This is one of several events that we're doing across the state of Oregon, and it's good to actually see some of our customers. Am I that boring already? No, it's good to see some of our customers in person and be able to have this conversation with you all. And that's what we want this to be. We're going to talk for a while, but we do want this to become a conversation. But first off, I want to talk about a little bit of background of our meteorology and what we do. I myself am a meteorologist of 19 years. I actually come from a media background. So before I worked at the utility, I was like you all, just a utility customer. So I didn't really know that much about what we do now here at Pacific Power. But I've been forecasting for 19 years. I've worked all over the country, and I'm really excited to be here in the Pacific Northwest. This is the most beautiful part of America. You can't beat it. And really excited to be back here in the Medford, Rogue Valley area too. With that said, some of you all have lived here for a long time, maybe your entire lives, and you've probably noticed that we've had a lot of changes in the weather over the last couple of decades. And, there's a lot of debate about what those changes are, why it's being caused, or et cetera. But one thing that we do know for sure, there is more extreme weather happening, and wildfires happening in Oregon and all across the West with greater frequency. It's something that impacts all of us, every single person in the community. Well, that's why a lot of you all are here tonight. You wanted to talk about you want to hear us talk about wildfire mitigation. You want to talk about wildfire as well and how it may have impacted you. And you want to hear what we are doing to keep you all safe and keep the community safe, and how we stay ahead of the extreme weather that can lead to high-risk fire days. That's what we are concerned about in meteorology. So that's my number one job. That's what we do. That's what we're here to talk about. So the meteorology team here at Pacific Power, not just me, but the team of 5, soon to be 6 meteorologists on our team, we are here to keep you guys ahead of those most extreme fire days, right? That's what we're here for. We're one of the first utilities across the Western United States to, rather across the country, period, to invest in a team of meteorologists. And that's pretty unique. Like I said before, I worked at Pacific Power here, Pacificor. I just joined the company last year. I had no idea that there were that many utilities that had meteorologists. I knew some of the California ones had. That's sort of a thing that's been going on there for a couple decades, but I had no idea so many more utilities were moving into that space, and Pacific Power is one of the first to do that. So what do? We do advanced weather research, forecasting. It's in-house. We also work with vendors, contractors, other organizations. We'll talk more about that in just a bit. But it all starts with situational awareness. So we're always aware of what's happening across the entire community at all times. That's our job. So what does that mean to be situationally aware? In our case, we're talking about what sort of weather is happening that could have impacts to the system. Now, we're just coming out of winter, spring. Spring's almost over. It just feels like it's going to turn on a dime later this week. It's supposed to be 80 already later this week, which is kind of crazy. We are in the winter, we spend most of our time worried about wind, winter storms, snow, ice, how it could impact the system. But we're moving towards the most important part of the year for us in meteorology, and that's the fire season. So our job, like I said, is to be aware of what is happening, analyzing, collecting data in real time that could help us predict wildfire conditions and high fire risk days. So we could take different kinds of actions to reduce the risk that wildfire will or possibly occur. Situational awareness is about, of course, what's happening now and today. We have a forecaster on duty today. I was on duty last week. This week, one of the other meteorologists is on duty, and he's spent the day looking at every single part of the territory, including right here in the Rogue Valley and the surrounding areas. And we also are situationally aware of what's coming soon. In meteorology, we do a short-term weather forecast, a short-term fire risk forecast based on computer modeling and forecaster experience as well. Hopefully this works. I pressed the little green button and nothing's happened. Oh, there we go. Maybe someone assisted me back there. Thank you. Okay, so daily fire risk forecasting. What's going on with the weather right now, today, everywhere that we provide power. Again, we are a team of 5, soon to be 6. We forecast for Oregon and 5 other states. So we're looking at a very large territory. Pacific Power stretches from Washington, the Yakima area, all the way down into Northern California. So we're a very expansive company as far as size. Every day, one meteorologist is covering the weather duty for 3 states. So we've got one meteorologist looking at 3 states, another meteorologist looking at another 3 states, and we forecast the weather 5 days out. We are focused on transmission and distribution, right? So transmission, the long distance power lines, how we get the power from the supply to our substations, and then the distribution is the stuff that feeds your neighborhood. So we're weather forecasting for every single one of those lines across the entire company, across the entire territory, across the entire state of Oregon. If you're our power company, we're watching the weather in your neighborhood. That's what it comes down to. So in the winter, again, we focus on storms, extreme weather. Wind is probably one of the biggest enemies of a utility, and freezing temperatures. But when we turn into spring, like now, our main concern becomes fire weather. Hot, windy, dry weather. Those are three big things. In fact, we actually have an index called the Hot, Dry, Windy Index because that is the recipe for fire weather. It's not impossible to have fire in other conditions, but that's like the big thing. Those three things are the worst fire conditions when you're hot, dry, and windy. So what do we have? It's up here above me. We've got 454 weather stations. They're on all the time. They help us monitor the forecast, the weather forecast, and the weather situation 24/7 a day, right? So we may not be awake, at 2 a.m, but we have a forecaster on duty. So if there's something that operations needs, or if there's some sort of someone reaches out within the company, they need to reach a meteorologist, there's always somebody available to take that call. So we've got that network of 454 weather stations, helps provide that 24/7 monitoring the conditions. We have several of our own weather stations on our distribution network. Plus, we also have some weather stations in and around our transmission, and we also make use of a variety of sources of weather data. We tie in with all the the National Weather Service, FAA, National Forest Service, RAWS data, all sorts of data. We use all of that data and input it into our forecasts. We also input it into our own weather model. So weather data that we have is tied to every circuit. So every circuit is tied to a weather station. We associate weather stations with every circuit in our territory. So we use that to make decisions all throughout the year, but especially in fire season. So everybody is tied to a weather station, and we're watching that weather station. We're looking at that weather station. You can see the map here. There's Medford at the very bottom. We have all kinds of weather stations all around here. So here's a closer in map. You can see there's Medford, Central Point, out to Grants Pass, all those areas there, down to Ashland, Talent, Phoenix, those areas too. We've got weather stations up and down the Rogue Valley and all the way up towards Grants Pass. We go up to Roseburg. We go all the way down to Wairika, where we've got weather data coming in from all over the area. So this is our local map here. This feeds us data every 10 minutes, and you can actually get some of that data from that website there on the left, pacificpowerweather.com. It's publicly available. So you can look at it anytime. You can actually look at the weather all across Oregon where we service, but including in your neighborhood, of course. So you can check that out, freely available. It actually has some of our weather data from our in-house computer model up there. There's current conditions, relative humidity, the wind, some of the things that we're most concerned with fire data or fire weather data. So what does that data feed us? A lot of our weather stations are 10 minutes, so they feed us new data every 10 minutes. Temperature, humidity, winds, the stuff you would hear on a television weather reporter or see on the app on your phone. But we also have the ability to check in with moisture level of vegetation, live and dead moisture in vegetation. And you're probably thinking, well, what does that mean, live and dead moisture? Live moisture is exactly how it sounds, right? Plants that are alive, they have moisture in them because they thrive on water. But dead plants also can have moisture in it, especially in the forests. Just think about all the things on the ground, that litter, that duff, all that stuff that's on the ground in the forests. That's super important for the ability for fire to occur, right? If you have a lot of moisture, if you've had a rainy winter, a snowy winter, we've had a decently snowy winter in the mountains, that is really good news because that moisture goes a long way to slowing down the start of the fire season. It's incredibly important. It also dictates how quickly fire can spread too. That's also important. That's important in the grass, the shrubs, and in the forest as well. So we're always looking at the live fuel moisture and the dead fuel moisture as well. So again, the data is freely available. Again, that website, pacificpowerweather.com. I love to plug it because it is such a catchy name, but also because it has all that data freely available. If you're a weather nerd, you can go check out charts and graphs, stuff like that. So I know a lot of people just love, I mean, everyone talks about the weather. So it's funny because like, this is a aside. I was at the dentist the other day. My dental hygienist doesn't even know that I'm a meteorologist. Spent 30 minutes talking about the weather. Had no idea. I just kind of laughed as she's like drilling in my mouth. Anyway, so we're not just operating on our own. We do share information with other utilities. Just a couple weeks ago, you know, Portland General Electric was in our office. We were meeting with them. You know, I met people from BPA and all these other organizations. We're always working together because this is a problem across all utilities. This is a community problem. Wildfires. Yes, they've existed since before we existed out here, okay? They're going to exist. So this is a thing we have to deal with, right? I'm going to emphasize that a lot. It is a community problem. And I think a lot of people in the community realize that, you know. We work with the National Weather Service. We partner with them. You know, I came down to Medford a few months ago and met with the National Weather Service here. Their office is out by the airport. Some great folks there. They live in your community. They live here in this area. They are forecasting for fire as well. You know, it's a great concern for them as well. We work with other NOAA agencies, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. We work with the National Interagency Fire Center, including the GAC, the Geographical Area Coordination Centers. They're the actual ones who put out the official weather forecasts for fire weather forecasts, I should say, for the United States. So we take a lot of information from them. We took so much information from them that we actually hired one of their meteorologists onto our team. So we kind of took them out of there, which is good. We have expertise on our team because of that. That's something that's part of our continued involvement in our wildfire mitigation and keeping the community and keeping you all safe and keeping our employees safe as well. So let's transition real quickly to wildfire modeling. That is that second part of that second element of situational awareness. You know, I talked about the now, looking at our weather stations, looking at the current weather conditions like any meteorologist would do. But I want to talk about what's coming next, that short-term fire and weather risk modeling. With our own in-house computer model, we're actually able to look back 30 years in the past using our computer model to have a good idea of what it's going to look like in the future. So we've taken our model, we ran it basically backwards in time, 30-year period, and that 30-year period helps us define those worst risk fire days. So we use that data to look forward as well. So we can say, hey, this wind that's going to happen at, you know, in Medford or in Talent or wherever it is, this is a wind that only happens once every 10, 20 years. That's our forecast wind. So we know, hey, this is a day we need to really look at the possibility of outages, or if it's in the summertime and it's been hot and dry, we're looking at that as a possibility that, hey, this could be a high fire danger day. That's what's really cool about this. And this is a computer. I mean, we have the computer in our office. Like, we run it in-house. This is not a government-run model. We don't get it from another forecast center. We run the computer model ourselves. And it takes a long time to run this model. It actually takes several hours to run the computer model. And we do that twice a day, which is really cool. And it's on the PacificPowerWeather.com website. All right, then we also, I already mentioned this, the historical data to look forward to see what sort of risk we're facing every single day of the year. We're able to identify which days we're most likely to see wildfire ignitions and spread quickly. Those most dangerous fire days, they only happen a few days a year, thankfully, but that can really make or break your fire season. You know, that could be the day, and you have to be ready for that sort of thing. So again, our computer modeling can compare a given forecast data to 3 decades of past data. It predicts how extreme the conditions will be, how it can impact our lines, the risk of power outages or power failure, wildfire ignition, and so many other things. So what we're going to do next is we're going to look at this video, and I'm going to kind of walk through real quickly some of the stuff that we look at. So again, this is when I should have gone on the other mic. I'm going to switch to the other mic real quick.
smooth operator. Right? Can you guys hear me? Check, check. Okay, good. All right, so this is our in-house computer model. It's called a WRF, Weather Research Forecast Model. And it actually is centered over our area. This is Oregon and California there. You guys remember the Smith River Complex? Some of you might be familiar with it last year. This is the wind forecast, rather the lightning forecast leading up to that event. So this is the lightning forecast that led to that event. You see those areas of lightning. That's what that is. That was a lightning ignited fire, right? If we did not have those thunderstorms that produced that lightning last summer, our fire season would have been totally different, completely different. So it doesn't matter climatologically. Is it going to be a hot, dry summer or a rainy summer? It can just be one event. That's what makes it so tough. You can look at long-term modeling. We can get an idea of how things are going to form, but sometimes one event is the difference maker. Now, this is Wildfire Enterprise Analyst. It's a state-of-the-art fire simulation model. We partner with them. This is a simulation of that fire, the Smith River Complex. And you see the purple there? It's our transmission lines. We were monitoring that last August, and we had to decide, how are we going to handle this as the fire was expected to burn through our lines? Now, it did, in fact, burn through our lines, our transmission line down there in California. And I will say this, the modeling is amazing, but again, it's a model. It's not perfect. This is assuming there was no fire suppression going on, which we all know that California is tops as far as fire suppression. They still get lots of fires. It's a hard job. I can't, kudos to the firefighters, really. This is a tough job. And then this is that same program that Wildfire Analyst Enterprise, Smith River Complex, right? This is one of those fire indices that we look at. What you need to know about this is red, high fire danger, blue, low fire danger. That's essentially what you glean from this, okay? This is leading up to that event. So we're able to look at this data, and we can learn from this data. We can use this data in real time as well to make weather forecasts for the fire risk across the area. This is stuff we weren't doing. A lot of utilities weren't doing just a few years ago. So this is the latest state-of-the-art technology. We are doing our hardest work this time of year to get ready to use this data and to keep the community safe, to stay ahead of everything. And the last thing I want to show you is our PacificPowerWeather.com. Again, this is the website that has all the different weather stations. You can parse it out to the different parts of the state. I think you guys will either be Oregon, South Central, or Southwest, but it's got all the weather stations that we have linked into our system. It's not all our weather stations. Some of them are ODOT. Some of them are federal government. Some of them are actually other utilities, but we do have our own utility stations as well. You can sort it by wind. You can sort it by temperature, humidity, et cetera. And we can actually, it actually lights up. We have this thing up in our office all the time. It actually lights up when winds reach a certain threshold, like a 95th percentile threshold, meaning that sort of wind only happens like 8 to 10, maybe 12 days a year when it gets to an extreme, or a 99th percentile threshold, which is maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 days a year. You can see that stuff yourself. I mean, this is publicly available, like I said. And then we show our top gusts there on the right side. We use this in real time for when we're thinking about how we want to operate the system, which Megan and Nora are both going to talk more about here in just a couple of minutes. But you can see the graphs. They're kind of fancy there. It's hard to interpret that, but basically you can look at a weather station. You can click on the map to see where it is. You can look at the wind going forward, or you can click on relative humidity or temperature. So you can kind of be your own meteorologist at home, if you will. It's pretty cool stuff. So it's amazing what the utility is doing, and I get to be a part of this, but like for me, this is all, like I said, it's all pretty brand new. So I'm really excited about the work that our team is doing. I feel like we are doing great work. We've got some really fantastic meteorologists on the team as well. So I'll stop talking. I've probably gone over my time. So next, I'm going to introduce Megan Buckner. She's the head of our wildfire mitigation program. She's going to talk about some of the more tangible things that we can do to protect our system, make it more resilient to wildfire and extreme weather events. And she's going to kind of, nerd out a little bit on that kind of stuff, which is really cool. Like we're all a bunch of nerds here. Anyway, take it away, Megan.
Thanks, Chester. Right? Meteorologist guy. Man, it's hard to follow that, right? I went to engineering college, not like public speaking college, but I'll do my best to muddle through this. So, Chester had a great point, right? Wildfires are a community problem, right? They're a community problem that we're all working on. We're all working to mitigate, all working to solve. Today, here, I'm going to be talking to you about some of the wildfire mitigation programs that us as a utility are doing. But I do encourage you to reach out to your community public safety partner. So I see some fire marshals here. Are there also some county emergency managers here? Any public safety partners who want to raise their hand? Awesome. I got a couple. Okay. I encourage everyone in the community to reach out to other parties as well. There's a lot more than just what the utility is doing. So following Chester described a little bit about how the utility is watching wildfires, watching the weather, right? And you're probably wondering, well, what is the utility doing? What kind of mitigations are there? They're watching that Smith fire. What sort of tools in their toolkit do they pull out to help mitigate wildfire? Or when it's windy, what does it look like for a utility? And so I'm going to talk you through some of those tools in the toolbox that we have. And I'm going to classify them kind of into two groupings. The first one I'll talk about is going to be a system hardening. It's kind of what it sounds like. It's replacing non-covered conductor with more hardy covered conductor, things like that. And then also I'll be talking about some of the operational practices that can happen. So not only just the hardware, but also like the software, right? Like how are you operating things or functioning differently when there's a different level of risk? So I'll be walking through those things. And also I'll be all of these programs are further described in our wildfire mitigation plans, which are available on our Pacific Power website. So you can read the hundreds of pages of our plan. There are some great infographics that kind of also walk through that as well. I do want to go on to the next slide and just, I thought I didn't realize I was clicking. Okay. Well, I did want to highlight that Pacific Power was recently recognized as a leader in wildfire mitigation. And so I do want to highlight that our wildfire mitigation plans are some of the top in the country. First of all, I want to walk through something called the fire high consequence areas. So Chester spoke to the meteorology, watching fires, watching wind, right? But there's some other programs that we use a different type of scoping mechanism. And what we do is we look at long-term risk. So if I were to describe this, I would say it as it looks at things like fuel and terrain to identify wildfire risk. So if there was a spark in the middle of a woods, a windy ravine, that's the type of scenario that this FHCA map or fire high consequence area map identifies, those type of scenarios. And that's where some select programs are being implemented that I'll talk about a little bit more with system hardening and line rebuild and things like that. Recently, Pacific Power did refresh the map. So previously we were using a map, it began in some time ago, 2018, 2019 timeframe. And so it was time for a refresh, right? Weather's changed, fuel has changed, terrain has changed. Let's update that and get some fresh inputs in there. And the map refresh identified additional line miles to be included in the FHCA. So expanding the scope of some of the programs that are applied for wildfire mitigation. So next I'll talk through some of the system hardening. Okay. So system hardening, probably the big program here is going to be something I might talk about as line rebuild. rebuilding your bare conductor with something more robust. And this can generally look like two things. We can come back and put in a covered conductor. Another option is undergrounding. Pacific Power is doing select undergrounding, where it makes sense on a project by project basis. So covered conductor, I recommend, if you haven't seen it yet, there's an example in the back that's really great. They put together this great board. Thank you, little Vanna White over there. Covered conductor, and you can kind of see that's what's being rebuilt. As part of rebuilding the line, you can imagine your line's going to get heavier, right, when you go to rebuild it with this covered conductor. And so what we're also doing is we're evaluating the design for more resilient materials. So where we used to have wood poles, we're coming in, we're putting in covered conductor, we're doing the engineering. We're like, wow, let's use a more resilient material. Let's look at fiberglass. Let's look at steel. More resilient materials is what we're prioritizing. Additionally, you may also see some aerial spacers as well to prevent wire-to-wire contact. That's another source of outages or ignition risk, if you will, wire-to-wire. So aerial spacers help with that sort of ignition risk. And then I also described undergrounding a little bit where it is applicable. There is some select undergrounding. Generally speaking, this type of work is being prioritized in the FHCA, so that the fire high consequence areas, for which this local area, Medford, all the way down really to the California border, is FHCA, generally speaking. Now, you may also be wondering, okay, Megan, so you're prioritizing the FHCA, but, Chester, he talked about risk, and it seems like you can have wind anywhere, right? So what are you doing about some of that? And I would say we're making the system smarter. So if you remember the video at the very beginning, there was a gentleman, Chris Spencer, who was talking about smart grid or smart equipment. I can't remember the exact catchphrase, right? And what I would say those are these pieces of equipment, the reclosers, the relays, the switching, the switches that shut the power off. Now there's smart ones, there's communicating ones. They can switch, they can attempt to reclose, or they can just shut off the power when they sense a fault, right? So there's a lot of different options, but the key is getting the hardware upgraded. And that's something that is happening across the system. Pacific Power is replacing the older reclosers with the new smart, what I'm going to call smart. Smart has a broad range of things. I'm going to say communicating reclosers and relays. So that's a little bit about the hardware upgrades, right? So that's one tool in the toolkit for Pacific Power. That's one program, is hardening the system. Another way to kind of attack this problem can be through operating the system differently, doing things differently. And generally speaking, I'm going to be talking about this in a couple of phases, okay? So first I'll talk about some of the programs like vegetation management that are being done. So yes, Pacific Power is doing vegetation management, across its service territory, but there's select wildfire mitigation, like extra work, if you will. Then I'll talk through some of the asset management work that's being done. So, fixing conditions that are more likely, to have an ignition or a spark, something like that. Fixing those things first or quicker. And then also talking through some of the operational practices, right? So if it's dry out, how do our field operations work differently? Finally, I'll talk through some of the system tiers. So like when it's a windy day, are we going to switch differently? Are we going to shut off the power? Are we going to, what is going to happen, right? And I'll talk through some of those tiers of programs as well. So starting with vegetation management, Pacific Power's vegetation management program can look like aerial and ground surveillance of vegetation along lines. Generally speaking, there is an enhanced clearance in the FHCA. So, where we used to clear back a certain level, now we're clearing back a little bit more. And the vegetation that grows quicker is being pruned back a little bit farther, right? Like you guys have raspberry bushes out here. Those grow pretty fast. There's also tree pruning that occurs, as well as tree removal. So Lorelei in the video earlier talked a little bit about that, right? So where you see a diseased, a dying tree, where you see a tree and you're like, oh man, that when I come back in a few years, that could fall on a line. They're removing those, and that's part of the program as well. Next, I'll talk through some of the asset management programs in the FHCA. And the way I would describe asset inspections is finding things quicker and fixing them quicker. And so what happens is we are inspecting inside the FHCA more frequently to find things more. And then also each thing that is found, right? So each rusty transformer, each guy wire that's off, each leaning pole that's found, right? They're classified into different groupings. And there's a specific grouping that is worked quicker within the FHCA. We're like, wow, we need to focus on this, right? And so that's what's being done in terms of equipment and asset management work by Pacific Power. Additionally, I do want to mention there are IR inspections. So IR inspections are flown on transmission lines. So a helicopter will go up, fly a transmission line with a thermographer. So it's this guy who has a camera who finds hot spots on the line. And if you're like, Megan, hot spots, why does that matter? Well, hotspots can be like an early indicator of a problem with equipment. So if you think about it, it's something that's arcing and it's hot, but it hasn't quite failed yet, right? So it has the potential to identify things that could turn in a condition in the future. It's a hotspot, and so it allows the people who go in and correct these types of issues to go in and check it out before it becomes an actual condition or worse. And so these are the ways that Pacific Power is finding, equipment to be fixed sooner and is prioritizing work in the FHCA. Also, I do want to talk a little bit about operational practices for awareness. Some of these things are generally applied across other industries as well. So there are water trucks that our field operations will take out when going during work in certain weather. Additionally, if the forecast is indicating, oh, it's pretty dry, it's windy, field operation personnel may also be asked, don't drive off road, right? Cars can be a source of ignition. We don't want to do that. We can also defer work, in certain weather circumstances. That's something that can also happen. Well, we had planned to rebuild this line, but it's looking pretty dry and windy. Let's defer that work for another time when the risk is lower. So those are all of the different types of asset inspections, vegetation management inspections, different ways field operations can work. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we can operate the system itself differently, how we can make the power come to your home a little differently, right? And generally speaking, it's sort of a tiered approach, right? So if you think about it like lower risk, well, let's have these reclosers switch. Let's have these reclosers, shut off the power and try to reclose, right? Generally speaking, higher risk, very, very windy. Oh man, this is super, super worrisome weather, right? That scenario may call for something called a PSPS or a public safety power shutoff. Generally speaking, turning off the power to customers, which as a power utility is something we don't want to do. But for safety purposes, sometimes it can be the best option. And then lastly, what do you do if a wildfire is approaching the line, right? So if I see a wildfire approaching the line, what is the power company going to do? And generally speaking, we do have some procedures to shut off the power in that circumstance as well. But before I dig into that, the first layer, right, when it's just, it's kind of windy, but it's not really bad windy. And I'm saying windy, generally speaking. I am not the meteorologist. I'm sure there's a lot more technical layers to this than I am simplifying it down to. The first layer, though, it would be in the enhanced safety settings on the reclosers. And there's a great video to go along with this if someone wants to hit play.
With more extreme weather, we're seeing an increase in dangerous wildfire conditions. Pacific Power is taking additional safety precautions to protect our customers and the communities where they live. When wildfire risk is elevated, we may place some of our equipment on more sensitive settings to mitigate the risk of igniting a fire if a power line is contacted. When these settings are in place, our lines will de-energize within fractions of a second when there is interference detected. A power outage is more likely to occur when these more sensitive protective settings are in place. We understand that outages disrupt our customers' lives and that with these enhanced settings, they may experience longer than typical outages as our crews patrol to make sure it's safe to turn the power back on. If an outage occurs, we will notify you of the estimated restoration time via call, text, or email. Our crews in the field patrol and inspect power lines and equipment, then perform any necessary repairs to ensure the power can be safely turned back on as soon as possible. Safety is our #1 priority, and these sensitive settings ensure a lower risk of wildfire for our customers and communities. To learn more about these safety precautions and for resources to support you during wildfire season, visit pacificpower.net/ready.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So, if you can imagine a leafy branch falls onto a line, a recloser will switch, right? You may have already experienced this in your home yourself, like when your lights flicker and you're like, oh, it flickered. That was a reclose, right? It flickers twice and then all of a sudden it shuts down. Oh man, patrolman's got to go out and patrol the line and see if that leafy was just a leafy branch, or maybe it was a down tree that took down the whole line and we don't want to switch the power back on just yet, right? So I understand it can be somewhat an inconvenience, but I would say just imagine in your mind there's a patrolman out there trying to make sure that it's safe before we turn the power back on. And the other layer to this is the public safety power shut off. Nora's going to talk more about that. Her emergency management group does that type of work, and she has some great emergency preparedness examples as well to walk through with the group. So she'll be talking more to PSPS in a little bit. I did want to talk a little bit about wildfire approaching our assets. So, for example, the scenario, Chester gave, where we're watching this fire, right, and it's coming close to our lines. We are in close contact, with our first responders, things like that. We're engaged. And we do have a procedure as well as if the fire is close to our line, we will de-energize, we will shut off the power and take that risk of the power off the table. And so I believe with that, now it's time for the fun part, which is Nora and emergency preparedness, kind of walking through what you can do as well as the community, and then also the PSPS type of work. So if you didn't come here for the free dinner, you might have come for what Nora's about to present on.
Thank you, Megan. All right, I can't promise I'll be the final lineup, but I'll do my best. Thanks for having us back here again, and I really appreciate everybody coming here and being invested and interested in wildfire safety. It's really important for us to be able to connect with you and talk more. As you can see, we have some first responders here from our local fire agencies. We also have, thank you. Let me move it. There we go. Thank you. We also have local operations management and our regional business manager here. So we have local representatives. I'm personally based in Portland, but we travel throughout our service territory, but we want to make sure we have representation locally here for you as well to meet up. So you heard from Chester about how we figure out what conditions we're in and how we look forward and forecast. You heard from Megan what we're doing long-term. But as you understand, our goal is to build our system so resilient that we never have to do these operational practices like a public safety power shutoff. But until we get there, it's a temporary measure. It's a short-term measure that we do. And I just want to make sure I talk to you about it today. If you have any questions, I'm happy to talk about it more afterwards, but I want to give you an idea of what kind of conditions we face when we consider public safety power shutoffs and how we'll communicate with you, what to expect from us, and then talk about how you prepare. So when do we do a PSPS? So again, I mentioned it's one of our temporary measures, but we have to have the right conditions to do this. So far in Oregon, we've only done one PSPS, and that was in September of 2022 with extreme winds, and it was a very hot, dry summer. The vegetation was very dry. The conditions were just perfect for it. So there's 3 things we look for when we do a PSPS. We look for the right conditions. So Chester mentioned the modified hot, dry, windy index. Our fuels, all the moisture was pretty much gone. You have wind is the major contributing factor. If you have very high winds, and you can also track this if you have windy days, that pacificpowerweather.com, those wind speeds will color code and they'll show you, you'll see normal color, then you'll see yellow and then red. Red means like we're into territory that's extreme and conditions that we may necessitate that. The other thing we consider with a public safety power shutoff is the terrain. So if you have a flat grassland and it's windy, and fires could take right off and they move really quickly, or if you have steep terrain, vegetation like thick forests and large trees, that is also prime for wildfires. So those are considerations. And then the final one of the triangle is, will it impact communities or structures or infrastructure? So those are the 3 things we look at. Meteorology can tell us about 5 days before they forecast the event with all of their technology if we're potentially going to look at a PSPS, having to do a PSPS event. So I'm going to talk to you about how we move forward through this process and what to expect if it should happen in your community. So in that 5 days, the first few days, we start really figuring out where that will be, which communities will be impacted. So we whittle that down to the most significant areas that expect to see the impact. And then up here, you'll see the timeline of how we communicate. So there's a total of 6 times we'll communicate with you for a PSPS and what you should expect. So the first, that 3 days, by the time we've got an idea, 3 days before the winds are expected to come, we start working with our local public safety partners, our fire agencies, our emergency managers. We start figuring out which critical infrastructure may not have backup generation and work to help either get a backup generation or resources to help support them, like hospitals and the fire stations and so on. We also work with the local emergency management to see if we need to stand up a community resource center. And that's different than a shelter. That doesn't operate overnight, but what it is, it's a place for you to go to as a customer that's been impacted to power your phone, your medical devices, to get on Wi-Fi, to receive information, to get out of the heat and the smoke, to get snacks, water, and there's medical services there available as well. So it's a center that we established that's centrally located if it's needed in the community, that's available during the time that the power's out. And then 2 days before, we officially call this our watch, we contact customers directly. And so we'll call, email, and text you based on the information that you have in your profile and let you know that you'll be impacted, and we're looking about 2 days out. 1 day before, we do another communication 24 hours out and update any information and continue to let you know that that's forecasted. And then 1 to 4 hours before we turn off, because conditions do change as much as meteorologists have their fancy tools, the weather may not, the winds may not materialize, and that would be great. And then we call you and let you know that we won't be doing the power shutoff. But if they do, we're again giving you a final notice. Again, we'll contact you at the time that we de-energize, and then we will continue to update every 24 hours. Typically, these events are short-lived. The one in September was For most people, it was under 24 hours. For a few customers, it was about 24 hours, a little bit over. But typically, they're short-lived events. Then we'll call you again, let you know that the weather's clear. We'll start restoring, and we'll keep you updated. Now, with restoration, it's important to know it doesn't all come back up immediately. We have to send our patrolmen out there. They have to look at every part of the line and then fix any damages. And we find damages because these wind events produce a lot of damage with debris and trees and limbs and things like that. So that all has to be fixed and safe before we can turn the power on. And that can only be done during the daytime because they need visibility. And then at the end, we'll call you and let you know that your power has been restored. And we do this for two reasons. We do it because some people may choose to leave their home, but then now they know it's safe to return home because their power is back on. Or if your power is not back on, then you can call us and let us know, hey, my power's still off, and then we'll troubleshoot and start the restoration. So that's a lot of information there. We communicate with you a lot, but these PSPS events are structured this way just because they're dynamic, and it's really important for people to know that it's a planned event, that we do this for safety reasons. So now you understand why it's important to have all of your contact information updated. So we ask everybody here that if you are able to afterwards, either call customer service or log on to your account and make sure your information is updated as well as your loved ones. But one of the things that we do when we communicate with PSPS or other outages, it's a recorded phone call and it's a text and an email. But for customers that are medical baseline customers or part of our medical certificate program, these are people that require electricity for medical devices. We understand that there are a lot out there. We don't have access to any medical databases, so we do rely on them to let us know that they have these requirements. That's the only way we're going to know. Up on top, you'll see information on the QR code. There's also a flyer back in the booth that helps you sign up yourself or your loved ones or a neighbor, family member for the medical certificate program, because what we do during a PSPS is we contact them directly. Customer service will call them, make sure they understand what's happening, and then offer resources or access to resources if they need them during a PSPS event. So it's really important for us to know who has these vulnerabilities. And it's not just for those that have medical needs, but also those that may have assistance that they require. They may not be able to have the ability to get somewhere else. They may have restrictions with walking or other types of things that we need to consider. So anyone with vulnerabilities, we encourage you to contact us and let us know. So that way we're aware during these events that we can contact you. And this time I want to talk about, we offer a rebate program. It's not a material that we provide, but we offer a rebate program of up to $4,000 for backup power. This could be in a form of a battery or a standby generator or a hardwired generator for medical baseline customers and medical certificate. The information is on the blue link. We also have a flyer back there. This is for anybody that requires, again, electricity for their equipment, but also if you're a service provider, if you're a care facility, if you are a hospice or an adult care facility that you deal with seniors and those with disabilities, you can qualify for the rebate and get access to that. So we're really encouraging everybody here to do that. So now I'll move to the kind of fun stuff, and I'm hoping we could do a little Q&A here. How many of you have a plan at home, an emergency plan? That's okay. That's actually fairly normal. Yeah, I'm here to encourage you to create a plan, and hopefully tonight, after tonight, this is a great time to go home and talk about it. Creating a plan is free. It doesn't cost anything. There's multiple templates online. It just requires time and just conversations with your family, your loved ones, your neighbors. Basic components. What happens if you can't get home or if you have to evacuate? Where are you going to meet your family if you have kids or if you have others? Write down all your phone numbers of all your important contacts. I can't remember phone numbers on my cell phone anymore. Remember the days that we used to have physically down? We don't do that anymore. So write those down if you don't have your phone. Simple things like that to help you create a plan and to make sure that you have a peace of mind that if something does happen, at the winter storm, a wildfire, even an earthquake, you and your family know what to do or know what to expect and how to manage around that. Next, I'm going to ask how many of you have an emergency kit at home? Ah, it's so much better. Okay, thank you. That's exciting. I'm glad to hear that. The kit could be in a form of 2 different kits. It could be one at home if you lose power, if you lose access to things where you have a supply at home to keep you going, or it could be a go kit. Some people call it a bug out bag where you take it with you and you have a couple of days of supplies if you can't get home or if you need to leave to keep yourself and your family going. Again, considerations, it's overwhelming, but starting small. 1 or 2 things item to your grocery list every week to start building a kit, slowly pulling it together. Make sure you have 2 to 3 weeks of food. And this is the worst case earthquake scenario, but we encourage everybody to plan for the worst case scenario. Make sure it's food that people can eat or like to eat, right? Not, the MREs probably from the old days. Consider dietary restrictions. Make sure you have enough water. Make sure you have things that you need for specific people that rely on you. For kids, it's like comfort items, toys, things that are familiar to help them be more comfortable. For pets, it's leashes and food. For any vulnerable members of your family, make sure you have medication or assistive devices, like if you need assistance with walking or any specific medical needs. So those are really important things to consider. We also have information on those in the back as well for you to take home. So outside of home, a couple last points I'm going to hit on. Defensible space is one of the things that we preach as well. We have beautiful greenery around us, but that can turn dangerous. I'm not going to go into detail, but it's basically 3 different zones from closest, middle, and further out in the house. If you have land, we encourage you because defensible space can be part of the solution to helping keeping your home safe as well. And then out in the community, be vigilant. If you see things in wires, if you see trees or debris touching wires, call and report it. The phone number is there, or you can call our customer service to get to that phone number. There's a variety of ways to report it, but we encourage you to call and report it because that preventative really helps also to ensure that if we have a vulnerable tree and we have high winds, that's taken care of before that storm comes. So I'll end on this last slide, I promise. I'll make it quick. So a couple things that I just want to touch on. Please verify your contact information. Our customer service number is 1-888-221-7070. Or you can go online if you can access your online account. Please make sure it's updated, especially if you have family members or friends that, again, need a special assistance. Please make sure their contact information is updated and encourage them to sign up for the medical certificate program if they require any electricity for their materials and equipment. And then also check to see if you qualify for a backup power rebate. It's $4,000. It's a great way to get some comfort and resiliency in your home and make sure that you can weather storms, all kinds of storms, not just wildfires or power outages, but a variety of different scenarios. So with that, thank you. I'm going to hand it back to Simon. I think we'll start Q&A.